Give it another couple of minutes or minute. Okay, we'll make a start just now. People are still coming into the room. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Peter Kelly. I'm Director of the Poverty Alliance. I'm really delighted that so many people are joining us today on this lunchtime webinar to launch the Rights in Action project from the Poverty Alliance. The Poverty Alliance has always recognised the importance of taking a rights-based approach to tackling poverty. I think our member network has also always seen the way that poverty is a violation of fundamental human rights. But too often we've struggled to put that commitment and that language of rights into action to really make real our commitment to a human rights-based approach in practice. So we're really excited that and grateful for the Inspiring Scotland and Scottish Government to have lent their financial support to this project that we think will really help to embed a rights-based approach amongst community and voluntary organisations in the Poverty Alliance's network and beyond to ensure that we are all able to make a much bigger impact on tackling poverty by taking that rights-based approach. The Rights in Action project formally launching today, but we've had the team start just from the beginning of this year. And there's three main programs to Rights in Action. My colleagues are going to talk you through some of that in a little bit, but there's research elements, there's a whole learning together dimension work program to Rights in Action, and there's a more general awareness raising program as well. So there's lots of real opportunities for organisations, for people with direct experience of poverty to be actively involved in Rights in Action. And that's one of the things that we'd like to see today, is to really open up those opportunities for organisations and individuals to identify where they might be able to take part in some of this work over the next 2 and a bit years. So I think that's really enough from me. I'm really keen that we get to listen to some of my colleagues on Rights in Action, and to a couple of organisations who bring a wealth of knowledge of working around human rights and poverty to our discussion this afternoon. So I'll leave it there and I'll hand over to my colleague Lydia. Lydia, if you want to come on screen now, we can get started. Thanks very much, Lydia.
Thanks so much, Peter, and thank you so much for everyone who's here today. So I'm the Development Officer who's going to be working on the Rights in Action project. So there are 2 components that are really my role, and the first one is raising awareness of human rights and their relation to poverty through awareness raising workshops. And I think some of you have already chatted to me, and some of you will, but around awareness raising workshops, and then also by facilitating groups so we can bring people together for some more in-depth knowledge sharing and learning. And my role here is to facilitate these spaces, and also to support our members in the action that they wish to take, and just to stand behind community action and support with resources, with time, with whatever is really needed from me, so we can start to put our rights into action. I'm going to pass over now to Paul, who is our research officer, and he's going to explain the third part of this project.
Best if I'm mute. Hi everyone, my name is Paul and I'm the research officer for the Rights in Action project. So research is a big part of Rights in Action, and over the course of the project we're aiming to carry out 4 participatory research projects. These projects will explore the intersection of poverty and discrimination using the participatory action, human rights and capability approach. So we're using this research method because it's an effective way of both gathering evidence whilst also deepening knowledge of human rights for all those involved. This research will be led by community researchers, which will enable those taking part to explore the issues and questions that are relevant to them and the communities that they are part of. To produce the research projects and to recruit community researchers, we'll work alongside partner organisations. We'll provide training and support to partner organisations and community researchers, and when it comes to sharing the research findings, we'll work in collaboration to ensure that the research has impact that's relevant for everyone involved. In terms of getting involved, we've identified the first organisations that we'll work with. However, we envisage that we'll reach out over the next year or so to find other partner organisations. So if you are part of an organisation that could be interested in the research element of the project, please get in touch. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks so much, Paul. So we've spoken a bit about the what of this project. So the awareness raising program and workshops, the kind of more extended learning together groups, and the research component. But we haven't touched on the why entirely. So at Poverty Alliance, we think that poverty is a human rights issue. We also think that human rights could be a really useful tool in our anti-poverty work. And this is mainly due to the way that human rights can help us shift the conversation. When we articulate the needs of our communities in regard to rights, we're not asking the duty bearers, our government, our public bodies, we're not asking them for favours, we're asking for them to meet the things that they're obligated to do to keep their promises. Human rights can also be empowering for our communities and can also work to facilitate really active participation. We all have rights, and we hope this project will help us be able to name them and to claim them. So, human rights are fundamentally about enabling us to live lives that are dignified. And we know that people who live in poverty can have their dignity removed by inhumane policies and inhumane practices. Other than this kind of overarching way that human rights and poverty are interrelated, poverty also stops people from being able to access some key and specific rights. Most of these rights are found in a piece of international legislation that our government has signed up to. And this is the International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights. So the rights are outlined in this that we think are really important to think about when we consider poverty are the rights to an adequate standard of living, including adequate housing, adequate food, the right to the highest attainable standard of physical and mental health, the right to work, workers' rights like fair pay, and the right to participate in cultural and political life. I think all of us that have experience in anti-poverty spaces or experience of poverty are aware of how poverty can act to stop people from being able to access these rights and can violate these rights. Our government, when it signed this legislation, made a promise to protect these rights from infringement from third parties, to respect these rights, to make sure that legislation that they pass doesn't infringe them, and to fulfill these rights. And there's a key principle to think about here that's called progressive realization. This is the idea that the government should be taking steps towards ensuring we can all access these rights, and it needs to keep getting better. So if things are bad now, in 6 months, they should be better. And in a further 6 months, they should be even better. But currently we know poverty in Scotland is increasing. It's not getting better, and progressive realization isn't happening. We don't just have to take my word for poverty being a human rights issue. At the Poverty Alliance, we're big fans of participation. And I've been having conversations with people with experience of poverty, and our wonderful community activist group members, Amanda and Joanne, let me video some of the conversations that we've had. And I'm just going to share that with you now.
Poverty is definitely a human rights issue because it's, you know, poverty can stop you getting food. It can stop you heating your house. And it can also stop you from travelling to, well, even vaccination appointments, doctor's appointments and things. So I would say absolutely, definitely, poverty is a human rights issue. People need to know the human rights as soon as is possible. Yeah, we definitely need to change that so that everybody knows exactly what is their right.
I think poverty is a human rights issue because it stops people from getting like their basic needs. For instance, like with myself, adequate housing. I'm currently stuck in a 2-bedroom house with 4 kids, 2 who are autistic, and it's chaos. And I'm just getting the same kind of answers. Like there's just like nothing there available for me, even though I've offered to wait, and I'm saying like what I need to do to be in the right place for like housing, and I know there is housing issues, but like I feel like I've been waiting 9 years like on a waiting list. I feel like I should become a priority at some point, and with the housing issues like and just now it's just becoming worse as the older they get. But there where I don't know where to turn. My housing officer just doesn't really have any answers for me. So yeah, just like issues like that, it really does like affect people. And then like obviously myself, I feel like I'm quite a strong person and stuff like that, but I do feel like how issues like this can like affect people's mental health, and like because they just don't have anywhere to turn to.
People and to speak about human rights and poverty, because a lot of people don't seem to put them in the same sort of, you know, sentence or the same, you know, thing, and they definitely are. You know, I mean, you know, we know with the pandemic and now the sort of rise in fuel costs, food costs, and all that kind of thing, it really is absolutely imperative that we really think about sort of people's human rights and get sort of advocacy that is free so that people can get access to something when they think that their rights have been breached. If they know about it, more education is needed as well. So that's what I would say.
So big thank you to Joanna and Amanda for speaking to me, and also a big thank you to all of the other community activists that engaged in conversations with me around human rights and poverty. So I hope that we've established why poverty is a human rights issue, but what I haven't really touched on is why we think it's such a useful tool. So when we speak about our claims, we advocate for the needs of our communities using the language of human rights. We are using the language that the government has agreed is important. We're using measures that the government have agreed is important. And we're also not asking for charity. We're asking for the things that the government has already promised to us when that international legislation was ratified. In Scotland, the situation is changing. We know that the Human Rights Bill will be passed at some point, and one of the key recommendations that fed into it was incorporating that international piece of legislation into Scots law. So we hope that it will be an even more powerful tool to use to hold those in power to account and make sure that people are keeping their promises. Another reason why human rights can be a really powerful tool to use in our anti-poverty work is the fact that human rights are empowering. Communities that experience poverty are often marginalized and stigmatized, and human rights are a practical framework that acknowledge that we are all equal. We should all be able to access these rights, regardless of our income, of our gender, of our race, our religion, our sex, our age. We should all have these rights, and we hope that this project is going to help us work with our members and work with communities to allow people to name and claim these rights. Another reason why we think a human rights-based approach can be really powerful is the emphasis that this approach has on participation. What underlies a human rights-based approach is the idea that everyone should have a say in things that impact their rights. And so participation is at the real center of this. And we think that this is a really powerful tool and that people deserve to be heard. Human rights also can help us frame our asks in similar ways. So all of us are pushing for the same goal, using the same language, and we can spotlight really key issues and draw attention to them. Communities and our membership base hopefully have a really big role to play in this. And for this project, what we want to do is to just be able to support with resources, be able to raise awareness, and be able to bring people together to learn. At the end of this session, I'll give you some kind of concrete ways you can get involved with the project. But before then, I'm going to say a really big thank you to everyone for listening to me and pass this over to Terry, who is a wonderful community activist doing loads of really great work in Fergusley Park, and he's going to come and share his experience with us. So over to you, Terry.
Okay, can you hear me?
I can hear you, but I can't see you.
Yeah, I can't put the camera on because it was you that put it off.
Oh, there we are.
Okay. Hi, folks. Well, first of all, Lydia, thanks very much for asking me to take part in what I regard a really exciting project. And it wasn't until I had a discussion with yourself that provided me with an opportunity to reflect on some of the work that we're doing here in Fergusley Park. I'll firstly introduce myself. My name's Terry Mcterman. I'm the project lead secretary, if you like, of a community group called Darkwood Crew. We have one defining aim of helping Fergusley flourish, and have adopted a variety of community development-based approaches to tackle long-standing and historical issues, which sadly have been exacerbated with the recent pandemic. So food insecurity, fuel poverty, isolation and loneliness, mental health positivity, and our overarching aim, if you like, is the local environment with a key focus on climate change in particular. I'm also a community development worker with the Tannahill Centre, which is also based in Fergusley Park, and I'm nearing the end of my first year at Glasgow Uni doing my community development degree. So this is very much in keeping with a lot of stuff that we do, without necessarily thinking about it through a lens of a rights-based approach. So we speak about asset-based approaches to community development, needs-based approaches, etc. But I'll be honest, I've been doing this for many years now, and rights-based approach is very much a new phrase, even for me as an aspiring practitioner. So I personally think that it's a great idea, because for us in Fergusley, what we've actively tried to do by creating our own community market, utilising perhaps relationships and building on those relationships that we established throughout the pandemic, lockdown in particular. So it's about empowering people to understand that they have the ability to go away and build things within their communities, which meets those local needs, which aren't being met by maybe wider kind of strategic or government departments. I don't think it's alien to say that a number of things that previously would have been administered by government, local government, national government, etc., now appears to have fallen into the third sector's kind of lap, unbeknowingly, and an eagerness to try and continue to meet those needs is just about kind of dealing with what you have. So we've got a community market, we have a community meal, we have an elderly lunch club, and when you put all of that into context, it's all about food insecurity, fuel poverty, isolation and loneliness. And these are all the kind of main issues that we think of when we think about poverty. And over the last 2 years, I can firmly tell you that we've been successful in changing it from that poor me party, which tends to be the kind of run of the mill when we speak about poverty. It's, oh, they're there now, those poor people. When in actual fact, if you look at it through a rights-based approach, it does in fact, as Lydia was saying, have that real empowering factor. People on the street, they know that their kid has a right to education. They know that they have a right to medical treatment at the hospital, but it's those food insecurity, those fuel poverty, those accessing safe and accessible green spaces locally to improve one's mental health. These are all equally important when tackling poverty, and it's through that rights-based approach, despite not speaking about it in that way, that we've managed to very successfully change a number of our poverty tackling provisions from that Poor Me Party back to a celebration, if you like, of the sustainable solutions that we as a community have managed to identify. Now, if we start as practitioners, start talking about our work through the lens of rights-based, then I think that when people know it's a right, they become much more emotive and much more active in righting that wrong, for want of a better phrase, than if it's just a community market where you're going along because you're suffering from food insecurity. So for me, the biggest part is about empowerment. And when we look at Ferguson Park's history, participation has always been identified as a stumbling block in the three major regenerative strategies that we've been blessed with from three different governments by three different political parties. So it's not about a political ideology. It's about genuinely getting local people participating in the kind of identification and implementation of the sustainable solutions required to meet those immediate needs locally. So yeah, I'm really excited about this project. I think it's long overdue. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to getting my sleeves rolled up and as involved as I possibly can. Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming along today, Terry, and thank you so much for your input and sharing your experience in Ferguson Park. So my next speaker is the wonderful Lorraine Barry from Making Rights Real. So Making Rights Real is a grassroots human rights organisation that has a focus around enabling people to name and claim their rights. And Lorraine is going to share with us some experience of using human rights as a tool for change. So over to you, Lorraine.
Thanks, Lydia. Hi, everyone. I'm just having a bit of a problem sharing my screen, Lydia. Hold on 1 second. I'm going to just share my screen to do a small PowerPoint. For some reason, you can't see the top portion of the slide, but I think you get the gist. Hi, can everyone see that? Great. So hi everyone, my name is Lorraine Barry. I work for Making Rights Real. I'd like to thank Lydia for inviting us to speak today. And I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome Poverty Alliance's new project, Rights in Action. We really support the aims of your project, one of which is that Rights in Action will work with communities to add human rights to their collective power. Making Rights Real are all about collective power and making change. And the Eleanor Roosevelt quote there, as you can see, about human rights beginning in small places close to home. And unless these rights have meaning there, they have little meaning anywhere. In Making Rights Real, we know that experts are the people who are living in poverty, and they know their own experience, and they're the people who are missing from the table when financial decisions are made and when budgets are decided. Their voices and their participation and the fact that they need to be listened to has never been more needed. Human rights-based approaches are based on collective community responses, bringing people together and using human rights as a tool to organise, to force duty holders to make the changes that are needed. And as one of our founders, Innes McCormack, said, those who have can always argue that tomorrow is the right time for change. For the have-nots, today is not soon enough. So Making Rights Real, you can find out more about us on our website or reach out on Twitter. But we are a new human rights organisation for Scotland. We support communities to name and claim their rights, and we encourage others to use a human rights-based approach in practice. Now, for technical reasons, I won't be showing a wee short video. I wanted to share some examples of human rights-based approaches, but you can go away and watch it yourself. And obviously, after today, the conversation continues. But one of the examples I wanted to share was work in Belfast, where people have been working on the right to housing and realising their right to housing. And what they discovered when they became human rights monitors in their own communities, they set their own benchmarks, they did their own research, they reported on human rights as human rights experts, and they, as it says there, began to define how the right to housing could be realised progressively over time. Closer to home, a project over in the East Coast in Leith, Housing Rights in Practice, worked to secure over £2 million of investment in really severe housing disrepair cases. And what does a human rights-based approach look like in terms of concrete outcomes? Well, obviously it's a 4-year project, so you can see these things don't happen overnight. But the results of the Leith project, oh sorry, I should have said that's a clickable link. The purple text there, you can click on the link to learn all about the project in Leith. But what they discovered was that there was an increase in the percentage of households who said their heating protected them from the cold. There's a decrease in the percentage of households who experience dampness and mould. And the softer outcomes, half the respondents said that they cooked more now than they did in their old kitchen, and people reported feeling more confident and that other residents were more friendly. So when you start talking about human rights and organising, the outcomes can be quite wide-ranging, can't they? And what we're talking about, the right to an adequate standard of living, of course, and we all, it might be yourself, it might be people that you work with, or family members, people in your community. We know that people's rights are being breached, the right to health and well-being, to food, clothing, housing and medical care and social services. And it's about using human rights as a tool in grassroots communities to making change, to stop these violations of human rights. And this project is so important because poverty connects so many economic, social and cultural rights, doesn't it? There's so many of you will be working in this field day in, day out. The right to housing, the right to a healthy environment, right to social security, experience of discrimination, right to education, right to work, right to food. All of these can be intersecting, and poverty can be the connector, can't it? So that was a very quick run through, just a couple of examples. I'd love to chat more. Please reach out if you want more information about Making Rights Real. But I just want to really thank Lydia for asking us to talk today. We've got loads of shared outcomes between this project and Making Rights Real. Outcomes are very much aligned, and we really look forward to working with David, Lydia and the whole team to bring in some justice and rights. And yeah, I look forward to working with you. And here's our, please connect on Twitter, as I said, there's our email address and our website. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Lorraine. And I'll be sure to share the slides at the end of the session with everybody so you can look at the case study on the Housing Rights in Practice project in Leith. It's a really good example of using human rights for practical change. So what are the next steps? So this project is going to be running for the next 2.5 years, and there are lots of different things you guys can get involved with. So firstly, we're going to be running a series of Know Your Rights workshops. And when we send up the follow-up email, there'll be an opportunity to sign up for a Rights in Action newsletter, and we'll keep you in the know about what's going on with the project, when these workshops are. I would also love to have some one-to-one conversations with you. I want to get to know our membership base and what's going on already and where there is kind of scope for us to work together. Then there is scope for you to get involved in the research project, as Paul outlined earlier today. But my biggest ask is for people that would like to get involved in our groups for us to learn together. So this would be small groups of people that meet once a month, probably for about a year, for us to kind of share our experience doing our anti-poverty work, learn about human rights, share our human rights knowledge, and also to identify areas where we might want to push for change. And as I said earlier, my role there is to just facilitate and support. I also ask that at the end of this, when you're sent the follow-up email, that you fill out our Rights in Action questionnaire. This is really useful for us to get an idea of what people are doing already, what level of understanding there is, and also what resources might be useful for you guys moving forwards. I just want to emphasize that we want this project to be quite flexible and responsive. And so if there are resources that you think are particularly important, please tell us, and we would love for you to get involved. So just to overview, the ways to get involved with this project are coming along to our workshops, getting in touch with me to have a chat and figure out other scope for collaboration, engaging in our learning groups, and also there is the potential for, I think, 2 potential research partners for the research component of this project. I just want to thank everybody for coming today, and I hope that you found this session informative, hopefully a little bit inspiring, and that you've enjoyed listening to our speakers as much as I have. So a big thanks to Terry for coming along, to Lorraine for coming along, and for the Poverty Alliance team for supporting this project. Thanks, everybody.